point, all we've been using is markers, gray tone, and pens, basically, felt tip pens. This is where we're going to start opening up a little bit, different kinds of materials that you want to use. We're going to get into paints, we're going to get into markers. Here's a great set of markers, and of course we're going to get into the pencil as well, and how to use that. All this stuff is here to support your drawing. We're still going to be drawing with the pen, and this is just here to elevate the sketch and the drawing, okay? You guys are welcome to go back to your old sketches and drawings to bring them up a little bit more if you want to, or even to make redesigns. And especially from here on out, any of your guys' stuff that you do redesign-wise, please use as much of the other mediums as you like, okay? Now, please be careful of how much you use. Very similar to the way we approach the white gel pen, is that minimal is best, okay? This is not your personal sketchbook. Or not sketchbook, it's a color book. I don't want you guys just going in there paint by numbers and just filling in what you have, okay? So let's use it smartly. I'll start with the markers initially. And this is how it's going to work, is that when we're using these mediums, if you're going to stick with the markers, you can stick with the markers. And if you want to also include paint, it always goes marker first, then paint on top. Never the other way around. Okay? You either stick with one medium, but if you're going to combine the two together, it's always marker first. Now, there are other mediums you can play with too. Watercolors, acrylics, and this is gouache that I'm playing with right now. Gouache is a very difficult medium to use, and I'm sure some of you guys have used it. And the reason why it's so difficult, especially this brand, which is the Winsor Newton regular gouache, is the fact that when it dries and it sets, it doesn't stay permanent. You can reactivate it with water. And so you start to apply more paint on top of it, it starts to get really muddy because all the paint starts to mix together. So, again, you have to be very smart about what you use and how much we use. I like to use these. These are just water brushes. You guys can get them at the studio store. They're cheap, and they last a very long time. This one I've had many, many years. And they're great because you don't have to carry a vat of water with you. It just comes out when you squeeze it. So you can use it that way. Eric, could you grab me a bunch of paper towels from up there? Markers. Let's talk about markers really quickly. I'm sure some of you guys are adept at using markers, but when we're using it on this paper, please be careful of the saturation that you're using. The way I like to approach markers is very desaturated first. Okay? So I'll even do just a general tone of value of gray tone or cool tone, whatever it may be, with warm, and then I'll apply color on top of that. And I use this as a way to accentuate saturation of color. Okay? So I build up my saturations. Much like we go into a drawing and we build up our details and stick them to a focal point, I build my saturation. I go desaturate first, get my general tones, and then build up that saturation. Same thing with markers and going with paints as well. Okay? With the paints, I have very basic colors. Blue, red, green, yellow, and I mix. I always mix. I don't get black. I always mix my darks. Okay? Go into the marker first. I haven't really tested these ones yet. I just kind of picked them off the shelf really quickly. Please do have a piece of scrap paper with you, white, just so you know how it looks on this kind of paper and tone, and so what you'll expect on this kind of paper also, because these seem rather saturated, maybe on the white, and when you put it on the brown, it may look quite different. Some may seem more saturated on the white, and maybe not so saturated on the brown. So test your markers out, see how well or how good they look. I'm using Prismacolors right now, which I'm actually not a fan of. I don't like Prismacolors. I've never been. The only markers I've used since Art Center days was Trias. I don't know if you guys heard of it. Do they even have this anymore?
Which ones?
Trias.
Trias.
T-R-I-A.
They try to get rid of them when they're
That's what I heard.
50%
Yeah.
off. So.
And I like those markers a lot. The current ones, they're so-so, but back then, when I was at Art Center, the markers were great because the models were interesting. You had three different tips, and you could actually draw with them too, because they had a really fine tip on it. So these are all very saturated colors. And I'm still going to use these. I'm going to use them in a combination on this particular drawing. I'm going to start with the markers first, and I'm going to go into the paints on top of that. Okay? Okay. Let's just lay down the base value with a 3 and a 5 on this. With markers, if you're going to stick with it, it's about speed. You got to work with it fast because you want to blend them together. The problem with really saturated color is that once you let it sit and dry, it looks like a bunch of strokes on top of it, and it doesn't look like it. So you want to be able to blend it into the drawing, okay? Also, just kind of see how it looks when it dries out too. When it's wet, it looks very different, and then when it's dry, obviously it looks very different too. Darts.
How's it?
I'm just being more general with these strokes initially because I want to kind of bring the value down a little bit. With the markers, you're not going to be able to bring the value up. You're always going down the value, which is why paint is a great thing because you can bring it back up. Now, when it comes to color sets, I'll either play with general things like complementary colors. I'll go with like a warm tone like an orange, and I'll also play with a cool tone like a blue in the shadow. So I'm always mixing and matching cool and warms. You can go with an overall cool tone if you want to, or an overall warm. Pick and choose whatever you want to go with. Okay? And of course, you can observe the actual subject matter and pick those colors as you see them. So in this particular sketch, this insect was more warm. It was more like a tannish color. When I'm in the shadow areas, I'm going to keep it cool. And again, this is a very desaturated marker. However, as you go through several strokes and you build the ink on top of it, it'll have more saturation. Man, these Prismacolors are like sponges. It's really bizarre. Let's go back and forth. So again, I'm building that saturation around that focal point. And if it gets really saturated, I would suggest just come back with a warm tone and just kill it. Bring it down. So again, constantly working back and forth with a couple markers. Okay? Be careful of how much you put down because it will kill. Let's go with some warms on top.
With markers, you also have a focal point?
Yes. Pretty much right where I had the drawing is where I want to keep it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, do you always work with the same colors in your markers, or do you just occasionally pick different ones?
I will occasionally go and pick out different colors as well to kind of, make it a little bit different.
Are there any you recommend definitely getting that you use a lot?
Just the basic colors initially.
Okay.
Those are probably the best to go with.
Why are you using the pink one right now?
If I want to. Again, with these sketches and drawings, I may not have the subject matter in front of me, and you can go with the color sets that you see, but it's nice to kind of throw in colors as well that you just want to express yourself with. Just be careful how intense they are. When you're working into the drawing or the other colors, it's best to kind of blend them all together so it feels more like a transition. But again, the more and more markers I use, it can get really, really muddy and a lot of kind of combinations. So I'll try to usually limit the amount of markers that I use to just like where the colors are going to be the shadows, and of course the actual colors of the surface of what I'm actually seeing. But it keeps going down and down in value, and it can get really muddy. But I'm going to start to mix in a bit of paint now, just to see if I can clarify it just a bit. The markers, it's best to keep it very simple with how many markers you use. Usually I would maybe just kept it to like 2 or 3. Okay?
Hey Peter,
Yeah.
do you recommend us, like, should we ever skip the gray and just go straight into color?
You could, absolutely.
Oh,
Now there is a paint out there that is unique and interesting, and they have it at the city store. It's a Holbein, Holbein, is it? Yeah. And they sell an acrylic and they also sell a gouache. Now what I explained about the gouache is that these ones that when it dries and it sets, it can reactivate it if you add more water to it. But their paint sets they have it is permanent gouache. It actually dries permanent. Now what's different between gouache and acrylic, obviously the acrylic dries glossy, more plasticky kind of feel, and gouache dries matte. And they have a similar effect, and their gouache looks matte, but it dries permanently, so you can't go back into it and reactivate it, which is great.
I think it's called acrylic gouache.
Acrylic gouache. Yeah. So it must mix in like a little bit of plastic or something like that.
It's a Japanese brand.
Yeah,
It's quite crazy.
it is. It's very quite.
But it's really nice. I work with
I
them.
only found out about it because they came to me at Comic Con. They had a booth out there. And just gave me a bunch of free samples.
A lot of illustrators have picked it up.
When I use paints, I use it in washes. Washes first, layer the not only the saturation but the opacity of thickness of paint as I go on top. Okay. Now I was kind of going back and forth and cool and warm, but you know what? I'm going to go in there and make this more of a warm tone on the entire insect and just keep the cast shadow more cool, so I can kind of pop that out. I'm just going to go through with washes. And you can go on top of the ink, and you're going to come back in there and redraw on top of this, okay? And again, I'm going to go through with washes, and not going to look like it affects much in the beginning, but I'm going to continue to layer more and more paint on top of that and make it much more opaque.
It's absorbed by the paper too, right?
Yes.
Anyways, okay.
So the paper will buckle, but just keep working with it. Now, the faster you work with it, obviously, the more it will buckle, and it will actually go into the paper and lift it and tear it up. So it's nice to have things like a hairdryer sometimes. You can dry it out really quickly. Okay, just an overall wash of this warm tone, brown kind of paint mix. Just build up this opacity just a bit. This is still all about the drawing, so anything that you cover up, I want you guys to go back in there and redraw.
Can you really use this brush as a come on top?
No, you can use many times you want. Self-washing kind of brush, so you can just squeeze some water. Yeah. Again, I've used like this one here for over 5 years. Works just fine.
size of tubes too?
Yes, there's like a medium and a small. Now the problem with things like paint, obviously, is that you can't really do it on site. I mean, you could, but it takes so much effort, you know, go in there and mix everything. And everything's done, you know, digitally nowadays so much. It's rare to see things analog. It's nice to see it too. It's a longer process, obviously, but you can yield some good results.
Peter, can you explain a little bit about what you're doing with the color?
Again, I'm going with more of a warm tone. I did a wash initially with just a brown kind of mix, and then I'm building up that saturation and lightness as I go up. The light is obviously coming in from this direction, so on top of the shells, where I'm going to go much brighter in the saturation and lighter. And then down into the shadow area, I'll keep it just darker in tone. This cast shadow, I'm going to make it more of a cool, so I'll come back to that last.
So you're adjusting the color to kind of go along with that.
Yes. Problem with the water brush at times is that sometimes water just continues to come out, and it keeps getting really wet, so I'm trying to keep it as dry as possible right now.
So right now your paint is becoming more opaque, or you're trying to make it more opaque?
Yes, because I'm mixing more paints together and not really using any more water.
Hmm.
I'm doing general strokes right now, but I'm going to come back in with detail. Start hitting some of these strokes a little bit finer. I just want to get some general.
You're using less and less water each time, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Is the marker that you put before the green,
Yeah,
is it part of the process or it was more
it
exploration?
was just more exploration, and it's not something you have to do. And it's something that can help you give general kind of color tone, to give you a guideline, but it's not necessary. Of course, with the paint, you just have to keep wetting until it dries. Now, from a distance, you may not be able to tell exactly, but when I'm done, you guys can look at it a little bit closer. See how it looks. Because a lot of the time, it's a lot more gestural and looser than you may think. And I don't want you guys to be overly tight with it. Now again, it looks like there's a lot of loss of detail, but it's because I'm going to go back on top with the pen.
What's the red represent?
Just a shift in color. Around that core, I want to keep it more saturated. And really play with that. You don't like make it as saturated as you want sometimes. You can really desaturate it.
And in the end, you can still go back to the relative pencil detail.
That's what I find to do. This is cool. Block this. I never use paint right out of a tube. I always mix it with something just a little bit. Like white, I never use just direct white. I'll mix it with a little bit of yellow. show you guys how to bring all this back together. Stuff that I bought here and brought over, you guys are also welcome to use today and test out if you guys want to. So I'll leave it all out.
So you said they sell this here, right?
Mm-hmm. The reason why I like to use gouache because it does dry very matte. And so when you draw on it, it looks just as good.
Isn't the darkness of the shadow gonna be first read before the bug?
I wanted to frame it so it helps pop it up just a bit more. So I wanted to bring up the value of the brush just a bit. And so that I want the cash out to be really dark. That's what I wanted. And I might hit the highlights a bit more in this after I do the drawing. Do they have a class that's going into other mediums, things like markers and paints and stuff?
Product.
Yeah.
Derek Howard used to teach it, but then they shift all the Viscoms around.
So they don't have that anymore?
I don't think so. He kind of goes over it quickly when I had him for Viscom 5.
Okay.
But it used to be something covered in Viscom 3.
Right. You guys don't really get that anymore, do you?
I don't know if Frito does.
No, he doesn't.
Because It's like, yeah, one week you'd be like, I only want you guys using tumble pens. I don't care how ugly it might come out, but just experiment.
Yeah.
And then another week, you know, you'd be like, just use chalk and just flow. It's hilarious. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not jokes. Imagineering things that exposes the best.
You guys should have them after this class, right?
Yeah, he does Viscom IV now, but I think he covers a little more of Photoshop now.
Oh.
Like I think my term was the last, because I had a Viscom 3 and then I had to get 5, so I was like the last of that. So now he has like a curriculum he does now. He had no idea what to do with us because of that.
So you can see I still keep all that paint and color just in one area in the focal point. Everything else just gets left alone. Now continue to draw on it. I mean, it's kind of wet right now, so it's kind of hard to draw. But I will let you guys know. When you guys work on stuff, let it dry completely, then go on top of it. It's always going to be really ugly at first. You're going to be like, oh my god, I'm messing this up. I don't know what I'm doing. Just stick with it. Keep the simples really, colors really simple. And understand that, especially when you go back on top of it as a drawing, it'll look fine. One more time. So, I don't know if that's going to come, but a little bit later on, I have these guys following me around. They're going to be filming in this class, if you guys don't mind. And they're going to set up a bunch of stuff.
So you wouldn't go over this?
No, absolutely not. No, don't hit it again with one.